Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Voices for Change 2.0, the only podcast that focuses on mental health while mixing in movies, music, books, sports, and pop culture. Here are your hosts, Rebecca and Joe Lombardo.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Voices for Change 2.0. We are so glad to have you with us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for joining us this lovely morning sometime in the month of February.
You lost track?
I lost track, yeah. I don't know if I'm coming or going at this point. It's been rough.
That's all right. So I'm tired because last night I, as per usual, stayed up late watching the Olympics. I'm obsessed with figure skating.
Don't let her fool you. She stays up late most nights watching something, but for the last week or so, it's been pretty much all Olympics related.
Yeah, so feeling really bad about the skater for the U.S., Nathan Chen, able to land 4 quads and still didn't bring home the gold, so yeah. I feel really bad for him.
But we're proud of him.
Absolutely.
Absolutely proud of him. And it's funny because I can wake up in the morning and I've got my own Olympics correspondent sitting right next to me, filling me in while I'm getting ready for work. So it's kind of funny.
We're very surprised at how truly entertaining all of the events are. And I'm sure I'll get some flack for this, but the only event that I can't get into really well, that skeleton event, is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then curling, I can't get into it. So
who even are you? Because I'm telling you, I love watching curling. I get a kick out of that with the little brooms, and it looks like a little Swiffer. You know, you can't go wrong with curling, man. Curling's awesome. I love me some curling.
The best part about curling is when they start screaming at each other.
Yeah.
That's entertaining. I'll watch that.
Yeah.
But so we have a bit of a challenge for the audience today. We want to become the Johnny Weir and the Tara Lipinski of the podcast world.
Okay. I wasn't ready for that. I don't really have much of a resemblance to Johnny Weir.
No, you don't, but it's okay.
Yeah,
you'll learn.
Much respect to him for his commentating and whatnot,
yeah,
and
they're
style.
So good. They're both so good. So if you have...
Or am I the Tara?
No, I'll take Tara.
All right.
Anyway, what I'm getting at is I would like our audience, if they would be interested in this, to use hashtag VFChange and tweet us some of your favorite Olympic moments. We'll take a look at that during the show and see if we can get a couple of them on the show today. So,
yeah. In the meantime, our own little Olympic competitor in her own right is our next guest. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's a leader in the mental health world, not just on social media, but
everywhere.
With everything that she does with her career and her life. It's amazing. So she's an author, a blogger, and also an LCSW, which I'll ask her to explain for the audience when she comes aboard. But please welcome to the show, Hilary Jacobs Hendel.
Hello, hello, hello. So glad to be here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Have you been watching the Olympics at all, Hilary?
You know, my husband is watching it, so I'm watching it by default. But growing up in Manhattan with a family where sports was non-existent, and I was just sort of a bumbling, not very coordinated little kid. So I have a little bit of resistance to it, but I try. And I like the figure skating. And I agree with you that the skeleton, like watching someone careen head first, all I can think of is a broken neck. But, you know, I come from a long line of Jewish warriors, so it's like that would be like off the chart of dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of feel the same way. You know, we thought watching luge was crazy, but then you watch skeleton, and it's like, are you out of your freaking mind?
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
Such courage.
Oh, look, here comes my death. you know.
And who thinks of these things? Like, who was the first person to say, I'm going to go down a ski slope, well, actually it's an ice slope, as fast as I possibly can, going the wrong direction.
Head first.
Head first.
Right.
Yeah.
And it'll be great. I'll go to the Olympics for that.
I sincerely think it was a bunch of luge guys just hanging around
Screwing
one
around.
night. Yeah, drinking. Like, here, watch this, guys. This will be great. I'm going to go down head first. Oh, you better not. Anyway.
Well, let's get started with our guests. We're a little, we have a little bit of Olympic fever here. I think.
Yeah, we do. So, sorry, you're taking the brunt of it. So,
I understand.
So tell us where your mental health journey begins, please.
Well, I think it begins at birth because I was born to a psychiatrist father, and my mother in her first career was a guidance counselor and was just ahead of her time. I think when she was 18 years old, she went into psychoanalytic treatment because she was realizing she had too much separation anxiety from her family as an 18-year-old, and so when I was born, I was born to a very psychologically oriented household, and so I really do think that's where the journey began. So but I can spare you. I can focus it a little more to the last 54 years, and take it from there. But in several iterations from my own therapy, starting as a young in college and thinking I was going to be a psychiatrist maybe at some point, but then not doing that, to when I began my formal career as a psychotherapist, which was later in life at age 39 when I went back to school for a master's in social work. With the intention of becoming a psychotherapist, with the intention of becoming a psychoanalyst, and then that changed after I learned some new things, the things that I share in my writing.
Awesome, very cool, and we're gonna be getting to that writing shortly here.
Just for our audience, I personally believe I know what it stands for, but just for anyone that doesn't know, what does LCSW stand for?
Yes, it stands for Licensed Clinical Social Worker. So in New York City, at least, there's 3 routes to becoming a psychotherapist to be able to have a private practice, and one is by getting a master's in social work, the other is by getting a PhD in psychology, and the third one is by becoming an MD, a psychiatrist. But all those 3 routes lead you to be able to sort of be a legitimate psychotherapist, to get licensed, and to be able to accept insurance. So I took the master's route because I was older and wanted the quickest way to after the master's you have to work and train and get experience, and I did a 4-year psychoanalytic training after that and trained, and I was voracious to learn everything I could because I wanted to be the best therapist that I could be. But those are the 3 routes. And my early career, I was a dentist, so I had, I had sort of done that 4-year medical training, and didn't want to go back to medical school to become a psychiatrist. I'm so glad that I didn't, because I really, in social work, you learn a strengths perspective. You know what I mean by that? Like, you're looking at people's strengths, basically, as opposed to their deficits, and looking at what's wrong. You're looking at what's right and building on that. And in modern psychiatry, it's not really the fault of psychiatrists, but you're trained to look for, what's called psychopathology, which is what's wrong. And I think ultimately that actually creates more shame in people. So I really, I'm sort of glad I had so much luck in my life, that I ended up where I did, and the education I had that I think helped me be a better person and a better therapist.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very interesting.
Not to sell down the whole psychiatric profession down the line, but I do have some things to say on that, and I think we could do a better job of teaching psychiatrists some of the stuff, again, that I learned later in life, and even empathy.
Oh, I agree. Just based off of seeing the experiences that Beck's gone through, especially earlier in our marriage. I mean, her psychiatrist that she has now is awesome. But it took
20 years to find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And when we first got married, I didn't have insurance that covered mental illness at all, and she certainly didn't have any medical insurance of any kind. So she was getting treatment through a free county program, and it was like just herding cattle. It just in and out, and the doctor was. I'd like to say he was nice enough, but not so much. Mm-hmm. And we'd be talking, and he'd be talking to me instead of her. And I'd be looking at him going, why are you talking to me? Talk to her. She's the patient. I'm just here for support,
Right, that's outrageous, right? Outrageous.
Yeah, exactly. It drove me nuts for years. And when I finally got a job that had mental health coverage, we pulled her out of the county program as fast as we could and started looking for an actual doctor. And like she said, we just found this one, last year? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it took a long time. So I completely agree that training could definitely be better. Mm-hmm. So part of the focus of this interview is your new book, which is titled It's Not Always Depression. Before we discuss it, I'd like to bring attention to your New York Times article called It's Not Always Depression, Sometimes It's Shame. It was fascinating. I read it. I thought it was wonderful. How did it lead to the development of your book?
Well, in a way, both the book and the article were just completely based on my practice as someone who practices this method, the psychotherapy method called Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, which for short it's AEDP. And it's a method that I stumbled on by accident when I went to a conference in New York on emotions and attachment, and I saw the developer of this method, Diana Fosha, do a presentation. And something just clicked. I think, everything that led up to it, my medical education when I was a dentist and all the science I had I was really a science geek. I was a biochemistry major in college, and I went to a science high school, and sort of the therapy that I had and all the reading and the Freud, everything sort of led up to this moment at this conference. And this method I then began to study as I was concurrently trying to become a psychoanalyst, because I thought that was what was legitimate. But ultimately I work in this method, which is a trauma-informed method that has several differences between sort of conventional psychotherapy, which I can go into later if you're interested. But ultimately I wanted to write about this work because it was bugging me that it was sort of relegated to the, quote, alternative therapies. And I thought that it was helping people. My colleagues and I were helping people in a more effective, faster way than people in traditional non-directive talk therapy, more psychoanalytic, and I can talk about my feelings about CBT later. I think all therapy, there's no therapy that I say isn't good. I just believe that a good therapist needs to learn about emotions as well. So I'm not wanting to alienate any type of therapy. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense anymore not to have this type of education. So the New York Times article stemmed from, basically, I was reading this column in the New York Times anyway because it was of interest. It was called Couch, and it was psychotherapists would write in op-ed articles, and patients in psychotherapy would write in, and I would read it every week when it came out. And one day I was on vacation with my husband, and I read something on grief, and I just turned to him and I said, I think I have something to say that I'm going to write and submit to the Times, to this column. And it was this patient who I was working with that had what's called treatment-resistant depression. So there was it was an interesting case study of all this data of trying all these different types of therapy, CBT and DBT and conventional talk therapy and supportive therapy, and being hospitalized several times, cocktails of medications, so basically all the standards of depression care. And when he finally got to me, I didn't want to try something that had already been done, and I was already working in this trauma-informed method of AEDP. So I thought, well, let me rethink everything and treat this person as a trauma survivor of neglect. And then he got better. And it makes sense, why he got better to me. It wasn't a miracle by any chance, but I just wanted to share it. And, it was replicable by my colleagues who were doing the same exact type of work. And then the real miracle was that the New York Times published something I wrote, and then it just went viral because these are emotions are universal experiences, which is what makes them so neat. So we're all unique, and we all have a unique lens through our experience and our genetics. But the way emotions work in the brain and the mind is pretty much the same for all of us, unless there's an organic difference in the brain with certain types of disorders, let's say autism or something like that.
Right.
So I wrote the article, and it was from that article that a couple of literary agents contacted me and said, "Can you write an extension of the article? Can you write more about these concepts?" And that's how the book came. So the book is just a comprehensive work on emotion, on everything that I learned about emotions and attachment and trauma that I think the public could benefit from knowing. So I wrote it to be accessible for everybody because I don't think it's fair that we don't have access to this information. I think it should be taught in formal education.
Yeah, I'm eager to read the book myself, actually, just based on some of the research that Rebecca and I did on you and your website and everything, and just I found it fascinating all the way around. Just what I read was just I completely agree. This is information that I think would really be beneficial, and it brings attention to some of the stuff that we really don't think about. What we're going to talk about next, which is the change triangle. I was fascinated by that whole concept. So I just would you tell us what the change triangle is, please?
Yes, the change triangle is it's a piece of it comes from the academic literature, and I just I want to just say that I didn't invent anything. I'm basically translating academic information in a way that's digestible and easy to understand for everybody. So the change triangle was first written about in the 1970s as people were trying to figure out how to make therapy more effective and faster than traditional psychoanalysis. And from psychoanalysis, there came this whole other group called the short-term dynamic psychotherapy. And these were ways to quickly sort of get to the root of the problem, which Freud and psychoanalysis and others since then know is sort of a conflict between our primal, what they would call, primal instincts and fitting in with society. And so the change triangle is basically a map of how our emotions work in the mind. And so if you sort of superimpose an upside-down triangle on your body, and let's put the point of the triangle, somewhere between your heart and your stomach. It's like in the base of your body. And then it comes up and goes up and out, and the top of the triangle, let's say, is if you hold your hands up above your head and stretched out wide. That makes sort of the confines of the triangle. Just to imagine that. And the reason you're superimposing it on your body is that at the bottom corner of the triangle are these things called core emotions, which are these survival emotions that we're all born with. And they're hardwired. We're born with them, although they develop. Some of them, develops as we mature. But for all intents and purposes, we're born with these core emotions, and we have to be, because they're basically the signals of what's happening in the environment, and are we safe, and are we happy, or are we in danger? Do we move towards something or move away from it? So the core emotions you will recognize, they're sadness and anger and fear and disgust and joy and excitement and sexual excitement. And to give an example, you're well, let's just take your partner criticizes you, right? It's going to evoke, it's an attack, and you're going to experience anger, and it's just going to come up biologically. So that's what's happening, and everything out in the world is going to evoke emotions when it's necessary for survival. And Darwin and William James wrote about these things at the turn of the century. So again, this is nothing new. It just for some reason is not into the public domain, because I think our world and our culture, particularly in the U.S., we are afraid of emotions because they can be destructive and damaging, and they also feel so horrible sometimes. But anyway, at the top of the triangle, we have on the right corner the type of emotions called inhibitory emotions, which squash these core survival emotions in service of our staying connected with our groups and our tribes and our families. So, for example, if you're a little kid and you get angry because your mother says no, and in response to your anger, your mom does something like tells you, that that's bad, or she leaves the room and says, I'm not going to deal with you when you're angry, we learn that we don't want to show anger as much anymore, if at all, because it's much more important to have a connection with our mother when we're little. So we are able to restrict and squash and block and thwart our basic core emotions with anxiety, guilt, and shame. And these are the inhibitory emotions that in small amounts keep us civilized and keep us in groups and signal to us, what's pleasing to others and what's displeasing. But if you're now relying, if you're in an environment with a lot of adversity and you experience a lot of trauma, you're going to have too many inhibitory emotions and lose access to your core emotions. And in essence, then we've lost contact with ourselves and a major compass for living. Not only that, is when we have all these emotions that are kind of swirling around in our system, unable to be expressed, a combination of these core and inhibitory emotions, it feels so awful that we move to the left corner of the triangle, which is the defenses corner. And I'm defining a defense as basically any behavior, feeling, thought, anything that we do to avoid being uncomfortable in our mind and body. And that can range from, looking at your phone when you are up, just looking at your phone for a distraction when you're a little upset, to turning to a glass of a drink, to chronically relying on drinking as a way to self-medicate. Other defenses are just to walk out of a room when there's some conflict, or to avoid eye contact, or to get aggressive. And there's an infinite number of ways that we can avoid emotions, and they're creative, these defenses. You really have to appreciate them, because they at the time we develop defenses, they are really meant to help us survive. But what happens is, if we become chronically reliant on avoiding our feelings and blocking our feelings, that's when people develop symptoms of psychological distress and mental illness. And, things like chronic anxiety, depression, what are the so-called personality disorders, which are just, again, colossal defenses, like huge armor to protect yourself from being hurt.
Right.
So that's the triangle in a nutshell. And the reason these core emotions are so important for everyone to know about and to understand their properties is because when we go out in life and we get, I'm going to use anger because it's something that people have a lot of trouble with understanding. That, let's say someone bangs into us in the street, or bangs into our car if you're not in a pedestrian city like New York City where I am. Anger is just going to rise up, right? There's no control. It's only after you're experiencing it, and core emotions are physical experiences. We feel them in our body. So just imagine, can you take a moment and imagine when either one of you get a surge of anger, and if you really slow down to notice,
often.
What, right? You're human. Can you notice any physical change in your body if you really slow down? And it's different for everyone. like for me, I feel sort of a rush of energy kind of coming up and out. So there's, when we have an emotion come up and we're mindful and we know we have it, there's two things we can do with it. We can either tend to it, listen to it, know what that feeling wants to do, and learn techniques and strategies to let the energy from that anger flow through us so we get calm and relaxed again, and we can figure out the best thing in life to now do, if there is anything to do, to cope with whatever has angered us, or we can immediately block that energy and that impulse, thereby causing stress on the mind and body. So there's emotions are really, core emotions are the doorway to all sorts of good things, learning from them, helping our body calm down and feel better after we have an emotion, or it's the doorway, like a fork in the road, to creating more chronic stress and potentially more symptoms of unwellness. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
it absolutely does. We're going to take a minute. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here.
Yeah.
We're going to take a minute to take a quick break, and but we're going to continue with this when we come back, because I have a couple of questions about that. So we're going. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
We're going to be listening to Kenneth Morgan with Real Me.
I live my life in the shadows, always trying to hide. Didn't think I was worth it. Words stuck in my mind, like a crescent moon in the night sky. You're my light in the darkness. It's time beside your hand in mine. Never thought I'd find this. I've been waiting my whole life for you. You have taught me to believe in my dreams, 'cause you see through. You see the real me. You see the real me. You took me out of the shadows, the spark that gives me life. Your love took all my sorrow and made everything alright. Like a crescent moon in the night sky, you're my light in the darkness. Side by side, your hand in mine. Never thought I'd find this. I've been waiting my whole life for you. You have taught me to believe in my dreams, 'cause you see through. You see the real me. You see the real me. Dark and night, your love is my light for eternity. It's just you and me. What would haters say? We were born the same for eternity. You and me. Like a crescent moon in the night sky, we shine through the darkness. Side by side, your hand in mine. I'm so glad we found this. I've been waiting my whole life for you. You have taught me to believe in my dreams, 'cause you see through. You see the real me. I am the real me.
Hey, welcome back to Voices for Change 2.0. I'm Joe. The beautiful lady sitting next to me is Rebecca. And if you're just joining us, we currently have on the line Hilary Jacobs Hendel, and she is a LCSW and
licensed clinical social worker.
Thank you. I'm spacing out. What's the C? What's the C? And she's got a book just came out. It's Not Always Depression is what it's called. And we were just discussing the change triangle, and I am fascinated by this because of you were explaining what it was before the break and just how it breaks down. And you can actually, if you're able to compartmentalize the three corners of the triangle and look at, the core emotions and then the inhibitory emotions and, being able to kind of break down, especially if you're going through some certain situation and it elicits a response like anger or what have you. Please expound on this because I'm fascinated by it. Like, how would I apply that? Like, say I'm dealing with a customer and I get, we're having a discussion and they're angry about something, and then I get angry about them being angry at me for stuff, and where in a situation like that, where does a person go? You know what I mean?
Right. So yes. So I use the change triangle myself, pretty much all day, every day, and it's a tool that I use. So, for example, let's say you're with a customer, and the customer, does something, and this example you're giving is that all of a sudden you are, you notice that you're angry, right? So the first step in all of this, and why the change triangle itself, even before you work the change triangle, for just knowing it exists, I think helps build awareness. One could call this whole concept that I'm talking about mindfulness with a map. So so you have to be able to get in the mindset that you want to look into your internal world, right? For people that don't want to be self-aware, they're not going to be interested in this. That this is really about helping yourself through your own internal landscape, and then using that information to positively affect all the relationships in your life. So you're with a customer does something that pisses you off, and you now are triggered to anger. So if you're working the change triangle, you're going to have that moment of pause before you call the customer, an a-hole, for example, right? Because that's something that's not mindful. That's called acting out anger, right? And I think that's important just to mention that one of the reasons that people are frightened of anger is because they confuse what it means to experience anger or any core emotion. To experience a core emotion means nothing, you haven't done anything except to notice that you have it, to be able to put a name. I am feeling anger right now. I know that. To notice that, how you feel that in your body. So when I experience anger, I can feel red in my face. I can feel tightness in my jaw. I can feel a surge of energy in my body. And like any type of meditation or mindfulness, it's a practice. As you learn to slow down and notice your physical experiences, it will come into sharper focus. And that's a big part of this over time. It's a lifelong practice. So one of the keys to wellness and thriving in life is getting comfortable with how emotions feel in your body. And if nothing else, emotions, core emotions, which are triggered out of consciousness in the middle of the brain, before you even know you have an emotion, it's setting off a cascade of physical responses, readying your body for adaptive action. So, for example, if a tiger, was to burst into your house right now, you'd be running before you even knew that you were frightened. Did that make sense?
Okay.
Can you sort of visualize that? And it's only after you were to safety that you would recognize, oh my God, that was terrible, and I'm terrified that I almost got eaten. But these are survival emotions because they happen quickly, and we have fast responses, faster than the cerebral cortex can process, so that we stay safe. And these things developed over years of evolution, millions and millions of years, so that if this is the core emotions happen in the mammalian brain, so we can look to mammals and just to see how they're reacting to danger and to love and connection and safety, like a dog. does. So okay, so let's go back to you're with your customer. You notice that you're angry. You can name that you have the feeling of anger. You can notice that you have this surge of energy in your body and this impulse to call the customer an a-hole or to fight with the customer, but you don't because you're experiencing the emotion and you've learned enough to know that this is just a feeling that will pass, and it gives you the space to think through what's the best, most adaptive thing for me to do with my anger at the moment. If I pick a fight with my customer, I'm probably going to lose my customer, and that's not the best thing for my business. But if with some practice, right, this is not, you don't do this on day one, I can calm my anger. I can take some deep belly breaths, and I have these resources on my website. I can just notice my feet on the ground, and even in the presence of this other person, just do a few internal maneuvers. Even if I excuse myself and say I have to run to the bathroom, and you're calming yourself there, and then come back and say, you may, then it doesn't matter what you do. You can think through, do I want to apologize? Do I want to say, look, it's really not okay to talk to me this way in my establishment? Or do you want to banish that person from coming back? That's thinking through how to handle an emotion is the last step. But if we don't calm our emotions down, then we can't think. You know that experience where you're just too anxious, too crazed, and you don't even have access to your logical thinking brain. So this is all why the understanding how the mind and the brain and the neuroscience works, not a lot of science, but enough that you get how this all works, and then you have a choice of what to do. You don't have to do any of it, but it does help maximize, the chances of thriving in life.
Gives you a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, and it's how you meet challenges. So, as just the emotion education is a skill that helps, it helps our marriages, it helps our friendships, it helps our work relationships, because if you're just having reactions all the time, you're probably going to get into more trouble than if you can handle your emotions in a way that is constructive. Does that make sense?
Very cool.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
Good, babe.
So, excuse me. Your website is extraordinary, and it features your blog, among other things. Would you like to talk a little bit about your blog?
Sure. I started writing the blog when I knew that I was going to have a book coming out. It was about 2.5 years ago, really right after the article. And, once I got the positive reinforcement from I had actually 2 New York Times articles published, the one on shame and depression and another one on the healing power of hugs. I'm a big proponent of hugs because, again, it's another way to soothe, to soothe in the company of somebody that, again, is safe and loving and wants to give you a hug. But people are going to think maybe this is ridiculous, but even, a selfie hug, which I don't know if I coined that term, but I might have coined that term, just even putting your arms around yourself, it just calms the nervous system, that we are born into the world wired for connection and wired for touch and self-soothing, and when we didn't get enough of that, it can be difficult and challenging. But when we did, we feel comfortable receiving that, and so anyway, that's just an aside. So when I was getting the positive feedback about my writing and told that I have this, what I was told is that I have a talent for putting complicated concepts into simple language, and then I just wanted to keep doing it. I love writing. I love seeing patients, and I love my work. I sort of love the juxtaposition of being connected to people all day in this deep way through my work, and then also being alone and thinking about the work and how it could help everybody in the world by translating some of these concepts to make them usable on whatever level. And I guess I just want to add that one thing about both the blog, the articles that I write, and the book, that there's multiple layers of how to use the book. So as I said, not everybody is going to, one, understand the change triangle right away or want to use the change triangle right away or is in therapy or wants to go to therapy. But even the education, the way I can't imagine anybody regrets having basic education in high school biology, that we have a heart and a lungs and a stomach. Like, it's good to know about yourself. So this is just a basic education in emotions, and that may be all somebody wants to do with the book. And that is great. It's because it'll help you understand yourself. It'll help you understand others. It'll make you feel less weird. It gets rid of stigma in many ways, because once you learn that emotions just are, then it doesn't make sense to judge other people or yourself for having emotions. You know what I mean? Like, you can't. Like, we're told just to get over it. Well, no, we can't get over our emotions. They happen without conscious control. They're reflexive, and they're doing their job, and they're supposed to do that. And then we have a choice of what happens next. So to me, when I learned that helped me so much. It was so relieving, and it was an epiphany. The other thing that was so helpful to know is that emotions were physical sensations. And I was like, oh, of course they are. I could feel that right away. But having somebody say that and it kind of click in to make sense was also validating, in that, I really had to get used to that idea of how they felt in my body, and then I could begin a journey to get to know myself in a deeper way and feel more connected and authentic and all these good things. So it may just be that somebody reads the book for just the basic knowledge. It may also be, because I put exercises in the book, that you begin to experiment with working the change triangle. It may also be that just like we go to the gym to work out our body, and we can work out alone sometimes, and then sometimes you ask the trainer at the gym to help you out. So it may be that you take this book and you start to work it with other people, and you help each other in peer groups, or you read it. What I think is a great idea is to read it with a partner or a friend, and to learn how to help each other and talk about your emotions. And it might also be that you take the book and you give it to a clergy member, a counselor you trust, or you bring it to your therapist and say, I think this way of working, it resonates with me, and let's try to work a little bit more, going deeper into emotions than just having me, talk about the things that I talk about, that it's a way to kind of get deeper a little more quickly. So I just wanted to make that caveat that there's many, many ways to use the book, not one way. And so the purpose of the website and the blog is just, again, to give more examples of each emotion, different stories from my practice and from my personal life. And I also wanted to put, more and more resources on the website. So I have grounding technique and breathing technique. I have videos of me teaching the triangle at various other organizations. And I'm just trying to, put as much out there as possible. So that people can have access to emotion education, because I think it's really, I think in my most grandiose moments, has the power to change the world. And with everything going on with like gun violence, and there was an article in Slate today about, it's not, gun violence is not caused by people with mental illness, it's caused by anger. And I would say it's also caused by a mixture of anger and shame, what happens when people are isolated and disconnected. And until we understand what emotions are, how are we going to help people? How are we going to, help the world be a kinder, gentler place? We don't really need war anymore. It's possible to feed everybody on Earth and to give them shelter. So it doesn't make sense why people kill each other, except if you understand.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I've got another question for you, but before I ask it, I got just a really, really brief little story for you that I think you'll appreciate about hugs. So I had a coworker, former coworker, guy named Andrew, and real nice guy and everything. I didn't really know him that well, and this was a couple years ago now, and I'm at work doing whatever, and he's walking through the room that I'm in, and he's just, you could tell something was off, something was wrong with him, right? And I'm looking at him, and like I said, I barely knew him. And I'm like, are you all right, man? And he's, not a really positive response. I'm like, would you like a hug? And he says, you know what? Yeah. And I gave this almost perfect stranger a hug, right? And fast forward a couple of years, and he's one of my best friends in the world.
I'm sure.
I love this guy.
Ugh.
It just, we bonded over that, and he really appreciated it, and it made him feel better, and so I always kind of take pride in being a hugger.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. What an amazing invitation to offer someone. I mean, that's really beautiful, Joe. That is deeply touching. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Beck will tell you I'm constantly hugging her,
Yeah.
and I think I drive her up the wall with that.
Yeah. Well, because you got to want, right, it takes two, right? So, it's even interesting how people resist relaxing into a hug. And I write in this article in the Times, a prescription for a therapeutic hug, that you really have to be full body. It's very intimate, and you really want to wait and hug and let the person relax. You don't want to pull away. The person you're giving the hug to, you really want to hug them until they pull away, so that they can just, it sometimes takes time. And also for the people out there listening who have trouble with touch, like that is a thing, and that is it's okay, and it's you weren't born that way. It comes from again, not being touched enough, or being touched in a traumatic way, either being abused in some way, and you can relearn to accept that, to help, again, have another resource where you can be calmed, and to say the jargon, this idea of regulation, that your body and your mind calm down. So I had a couple that I was teaching where the husband couldn't even hold his wife's hand, that he would need to pull away in a minute. It was like it burned. And just slowly, by doing little bits of, that he could, maybe 30 seconds, just enough to notice what happened in his body with touch, and the anxiety that would come up and the fear that would come up, we could then work back to when that happened and try to process some of those feelings that were stuck from early traumas and early adversity. Wow. So you can unlearn, because the brain changes, and with neuroplasticity, it's so thrilling. We can really rewire the brain according to what we want. I'll ask somebody,
That's
how
really
do you
cool.
want to feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question that was
sorry, we digressed.
No, it's
yeah.
Is what are your thoughts on the stigma surrounding mental illness?
Oh, I think it's based in ignorance and fear, and it's so damaging, right? Imagine to judge someone who is already suffering and feeling down and alone. It's so toxic for culture. Not only the person who is being stigmatized, but the person who is stigmatizing everyone else is also suffering. I think of judgment and stigma as a symptom of our culture and of individuals. So I think, again, when difference makes people frightened, right? So when I've been thinking a lot about, what is it, something about illness in general. Like if you find out that a friend of yours has let's say a cancer diagnosis, it's anxiety-provoking sometimes to talk to them. Like, what do you say? What do you do? It raises fears of yourself and death. It raises so much. So when you find out a friend of yours or someone you meet at a party, like if everyone was open and says, yeah, I suffer from this mental illness, it would be so wonderful if people weren't frightened. But what happens, I think, is that they are like, okay, what is mental illness? What does that mean? Could I go crazy? Is it catchy? Does this mean the person's going to do something? Like, there's so many questions. And if that curiosity could be met with compassion instead of fear, and everybody could just talk about what their experience is like, no matter if you have an illness or not, we're all more human than we are different. And that's emotions that actually bring us together, because we all have those same 7 core emotions. So it's a huge topic, and I don't know, don't you think education on not only what mental illness is, and there's such a big definition in a way, I'm sure, if you ask 100 people to define it, you get 100 different answers, but just on what it brings up for people. So my question, in a therapy session would be, okay, now that you hear that, Susan has a mental illness, what did that bring up for you? what happens in your body? What happens in your mind? Where do your thoughts go? Let's get to know you and what happens in that experience for you. Like, it would be so great if we could all approach ourselves that way.
Yeah.
When something
Right,
bothers
absolutely.
us, to get curious and compassionate, the combination.
Yeah.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left. Time has absolutely flown by here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us what is next for you?
What is next for me is really the book, which is called "It's Not Always Depression," that Random House published, and also Penguin in the UK. I don't know if you have listeners from around the world, but it's being published in mainland China, and Taiwan, and South Korea, and Poland, and hopefully other places in Europe, and Australia, and New Zealand,
Wow.
and Canada, and U.S. Because the zeitgeist is here. That you're reading more and more, I'm sure, on emotions. So really, the book came out like 10 days ago. So my goal is just to figure out how to, get the information out there that this book exists for people that want it. Again, I'm aware not everybody is ready for the information, but it really is accessible. And I'm not the best reader, so that I wrote it to be sort of a page turner. It's not boring. The science is just has no jargon. I just really want to plug it that way. That it's mostly stories, and it's a quick read. It's not. I almost want to say it's a beach read. And I talk a lot about my personal life, and but the subject matter is I am showing how people heal from trauma and how they move from defenses through anxiety, guilt, and shame, through their core emotions, back to states of peace and calm. This open-hearted state that I write about, where the mind and body is calm, and we access our authentic self, which has all these C words associated. When we're in our authentic self, we're calm, we're compassionate, we're curious, we're connected, we're confident. All these good things happen. So I show how I work the change triangle, because a lot of people need to understand through stories. I certainly get a lot out of that. So it's sort of a left and right brain 1-2 punch, where you learn stories, you learn a little bit of the explanation of the science, and then there's a full reference list in the back for therapists and doctors who want to understand. It's all science-based stuff, because, as I said, that was important to me.
Right.
So my goal is to get the book
That's very cool.
far and wide, and it's not so easy, because there really is I think there is a pushback. There is some, I think, fear of when you start to talk about emotions. Some people turn off, and some people are like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. So I'm hoping that there'll be enough word of mouth and enough people reading it that the book gets spread far and wide. And I have people trying to work on Random House and Penguin UK, trying to get some big exposure, and I've gotten some articles in Time magazine and some places. But it would be great to really get it big, because I do think this can help a lot of people and change the trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to be huge, and I hope it takes off for you. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, well, the main thing is I would invite anyone that's interested to come visit my website, which is HilaryJacobsHendel.com, Hilary with one L, and or thechangetriangle.com. It all takes you there, and just poke around and check out the resources and check out the articles. And if you want, you can sign up for my email list, and that way we can stay in contact. And once a month I send out a new article. I don't like a lot of stuff in my inbox, so I don't sell stuff, and I just send a post once a month. And other than that, I would love people to get the book and to read it, and then to contact me and let me know. I love the feedback. And I have a Facebook page called author Hilary Jacobs Hendel, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm trying to figure out Instagram. That's kind of fun, because it's the younger generation, millennials mostly, and well, maybe not. I may be out of touch on that one now too. So
no, I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. So for this 54-year-old, I've had to learn a lot over the past couple of years about social media, which is for better and for worse, how you get words out and information these days.
I thought I was doing good with, finally figuring out Twitter. Beck's known how to work it for.
She does a good job.
4 years. Oh my God, she does.
Yeah.
And she's like, you use this hashtag, and you do this, and you do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
What's a hashtag?
It was gibberish to me too.
Yeah, I remember trying to understand what a hashtag was. So, So
yeah.
I
we hope that our listeners, run out and definitely pick your book up. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be getting it. I'm probably going to order it this weekend, and I'm eager to read it because I'm just taken by what I read from the New York Times article about your particular client, and that's inspiring to look at things from a different point of view. So.
Oh, thank you. I'm so delighted that it resonated, and
absolutely.
That article's a good one to start with and see if that piques your interest, and then if it does, then the rest of it will make even more sense. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us today. It has been incredibly educational.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with us, Hilary.
Thanks so
we're
much,
grateful.
Joe. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm so delighted to be here, and I'll come back anytime. And it was wonderful. Thank you
we would love to have you back on. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Stay on the line with us, and we are grateful to everyone who listened today. Thank you for being here. And this is a song for those of you that have President's Day off.
On Monday,
according to our producer, Scott.
Yeah, and those of you that have Monday off, you suck. I'm not bitter. I'm just saying. But this is Nick Hayward with Perfect Sunday. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Down by the river Thames, sandwiched in between her feet, she became Haley Mills, I became Alan Bay, born to be Ely Gray, make mistakes.
Don't miss the Mental Health Memoir of the Year, It's Not Your Journey. It's Not Your Journey is the true story of one woman's 20-year battle with mental illness and her recovery from a suicide attempt in 2013. Rebecca Lombardo candidly reveals her real and raw emotions in dealing with depression, bipolar disorder, the loss of her mother and brother, and more. Pick it up today on Amazon.com or visit www.RebeccaLombardo.com for more information.
Join us next week as Rebecca and Joe continue to battle the stigma of mental illness. Follow us on Twitter at Voices for Change RJ and on Facebook at Voices for Change 2.0.
Okay, kids.
We got T-Mobile's unlimited family plan with Netflix included, so...
Our New Year's resolution is to not spoil your shows since we can watch our own shows on our phones, tablets, or TV. Good.
Get 4 lines for just $40 each per month with AutoPay, taxes and fees included, and a Netflix subscription on us, so you can watch your favorite movies and shows. Only with T-Mobile.
Video streams at 480p. A small fraction of customers using over 50 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Netflix for 2 screens included. Terms apply. Price includes sales tax.
That's the sound of a sale. And if you're a business owner, you can save on credit and debit card sales by switching to PNC. If we can't beat your current card processing fees, you could get a $1,000 gift card. Visit your local PNC branch or pnc.com/save-on-sales to learn more. Restrictions apply, including fees used for comparison. Merchant services are provided by PNC Merchant Services and are subject to credit approval. For offer details, terms, and conditions, go to pnc.com/save-on-sales or to any PNC branch. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC.